The purpose of these videos is to help you with a project. There's going to be many different projects available to you in what you do. You could be writing a project in Python, you could be writing a project in HTML. What I am really concerned with here is looking at a database, using an API, your own API as opposed to somebody else's, and being able to program that. Now, essentially, you're going to be doing this from a device, so from a phone. So instead of writing a web page and having a web page to put all your information in, you're probably going to have your phone with some fields on, press a button, it's going to talk to your database via the internet, it's going to send back information to your phone, and it's going to appear on there, or device. Maybe you'll be doing exactly the same thing in Python. I will show you much later how to sort of perform API calls in Python and play with the data that's returned from there. But basically, we're looking at, in the long term, programming in Android, iOS, or something else like that. We are not really going to be playing around with web pages. Having said that, a bit later on we're going to take a look at Google Maps, and that will be mainly in web pages using client-side scripting called JavaScript, but that's much later. So the initial set of programs are for server-side scripting using PHP, talking to the database, producing an API, and rather than test it with Android, which would take a long time to actually write a program to get it up and running, it's much simpler if we actually use a web page to do that. Problem is with web pages, they're not very good at sort of taking input. So if you were in Python, let me show you what I mean. If you were in Python and you wanted to get some information from the user, you would probably type name equals raw input, enter your name, and enter your name would appear on the screen, and you'd type the name in and it would end up in the variable called name. There is no such way of doing that in HTML. We can't just write some code like that and expect a box to appear on the screen in HTML. We have to use some strange methods. There is no input, direct input in PHP, and there is no direct output in PHP. Both of them, input comes from a web page and the output goes back to a web page. So we have to learn how to perform that process. The way that we capture input from a user is through the use of something called a form. HTML form. I'm just going to do some simple forms to show you how it's done. So in the body, the content of the page, actually I'm going to save this as my index page so that we can just call it from the address bar. In the body, the content of the page, I'm going to create a form to capture user input. And there are two tags, a form tag and an end form tag, or element. I shall use those words, tag and element, interchangeably. Now that specifies an area for input. You can have many. You can have another set a bit later on down. It doesn't matter how many you've got on the screen. That is actually going to just give us an area to put some input. We need to actually specify, maybe give a message like we did, enter your name, and give an area for the person to type it in. The way we do that is with another tag called input. I'm going to indent this. Unlike Python, it's not necessary to indent, but I'm going to indent just for clarity in the form. I'm going to have another tag called input, and like we did before, this is going to have some parameters rather than just an end bracket. And the parameter that we use is what is the type. And there's many types in a form, many types of inputs, and this one is going to be a text saying I want a text box to appear. Okay, job done. Another form of input type is when you press a button, and we can specify that. Again, I've got another input, and I'm going to set that type equal to, now it's not button, strangely it's called submit. Okay, it's a special button that when you press it, it knows that you're going to submit and does some work for you. So there we go. I've got a form on the page to accept some input. I've got one box called text where I'm going to type things in, and a button. So if I save that and then take a look at that in the browser, we'll see what happens. There we go. So I've got a text box, that's the text, where I can just type things in, and I've got a submit button. Okay, now what we're going to do is actually we're going to press that submit button and see what happens. Hopefully you noticed that on the top in the address bar it actually put a question mark. You may have seen this when you've been going to web pages before, a question mark. This is an area where after the question mark a set of what I call key value pairs, variables so to speak, will appear containing all the data that you want to pass from one web page to another, and this is the only way that it can be performed. In the next video we're going to take a little bit more of a look at the layout and how to use these input tags.